Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this edition of Defense News Weekly, we're going to find out the latest details on the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford, learn which fighter has a leg up to replace German Tornadoes, and preview the 2019 AUSA annual meeting. In addition, we're also going to take a look at the U.S. Army's need for more range. With in-depth interviews, up-close video, and leading analysis, this is Defense News Weekly. Welcome to this week's edition of Defense News Weekly. I'm Jeff Martin. This week, we've got a packed show where we're going to preview the 2019 AUSA annual meeting and look at the United States Army's need for more range. But before we do that, here's a look at some headlines from this week's news. According to shipbuilder Huntington Ingalls, when the USS Gerald Ford leaves the shipyard, it could only have 2 of its 11 weapons elevators working, an issue that has long plagued the ship. Right now, the Ford is set to leave the yard in late October for Naval Station Norfolk, but the 11 electromagnetic elevators are each capable of moving 24,000 pounds of ordnance, but have yet to be certified for use. Some exact problems have included issues with the tight tolerances needed for the elevators, along with software glitches. Those elevators are one of many technologies on the Gerald Ford that are designed to reduce manning across the ship and increase its automation and sortie generation. The Ford itself, though, has been plagued by first-in-class problems since construction began, including reactor problems and catapult issues. Her first deployment is scheduled for 2021, but the total cost of the ship has increased to over $13 billion, making her one of the most expensive warships ever built. And congressional leaders are strongly urging the Trump administration to not pull out of the Open Skies Treaty, citing the benefits of being able to monitor Russian military forces. In a letter to Defense Secretary Mark Esper and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, leading Democrats from both the Senate and the House say that scrapping the accord would be a gift to Russian President Vladimir Putin. The treaty allows overflights, which the U.S. conducts using aging OC-135 aircraft, and it's unclear whether or not the treaty will be scrapped right now, but what is clear is that the move is going to face heavy opposition. The Netherlands has announced that they'll buy 9 more F-35 fighters, bringing that program partner's purchase up to 46. Dutch officials say this would set up a 3rd F-35 squadron for the Dutch Air Force, which would require more jets than the 9 announced today. Standing up that 3rd squadron would allow the Dutch to meet certain NATO commitments, and the Dutch have been heavily involved in the F-35 program and currently have aircraft flying at both Edwards Air Force Base out in California for flight test purposes and Luke Air Force Base in Arizona for training purposes. And Boeing's F/A-18 Super Hornet appears to have a leg up on the Eurofighter Typhoon in Germany's Tornado replacement program. According to a German media report, it centers around Germany's role in NATO's nuclear sharing program, where German aircraft would carry American nuclear weapons that are stored in Germany. The report says that the Super Hornets are already nuclear certified, while the Typhoon is not, meaning it would be much easier to integrate the Boeing plane into the nuclear sharing agreement. This has been a tight competition, though, and a winner is expected to be announced sometime early next year. And we're getting more information on the 2020 Defender Europe exercise, which is set to be the 3rd largest exercise in Europe since the end of the Cold War. The division-scaled exercise will test the U.S. Army's ability to move from a fort in the U.S. to a port in Europe, and then to operational areas throughout the entire continent. The event is going to include roughly 20,000 soldiers and their heavy equipment, and will be a big test for the United States Army. Some highlights are going to include a division-sized wet gap crossing, up to 3 airborne drops, and using Abrams tanks equipped with a Trophy active protection system and other new equipment. And the United States military and its assorted coalition has ramped up airstrikes in Afghanistan, dropping the most weapons in a month since October of 2010. According to figures provided by U.S. Air Force's Central Command, U.S. and coalition aircraft dropped 948 munitions in September. Now, this comes as peace negotiations with the Taliban have collapsed and as Taliban attacks have increased throughout the entire country. Every year, one of the biggest events is the AUSA annual meeting and exposition in Washington, D.C., and this year is shaping up to be no exception. To get an idea of what this year's event is shaping up to include, I visited AUSA's headquarters in Arlington, Virginia to chat with Lieutenant General retired Patricia McQuiston. Take a look.
Ma'am, thanks for taking the time to chat with me before AUSA. I know we're all crazy busy before the annual meeting coming up, but walk me through what you're excited about this year. I know we've got a lot on the agenda.
We do have a lot on the agenda this year. 2019 AUSA annual meeting. It's our 65th iteration of the annual meeting, and we're really looking forward to a huge event this year. We've got the new Secretary of the Army, the new Chief of Staff of the Army, the new Sergeant Major of the Army, and key leaders from throughout the Army. Some other defense officials will be there, Department of Homeland Security, and the Veterans Administration. We're really looking forward to a huge show.
So huge, let's talk huge show. I mean, last year was massive numbers of people coming in, massive numbers of the Army showing up. What do you guys think this year is going to be like?
All right, so last year we ended with just over 31,000 folks attending the annual meeting.
Wow.
Our pre-registration that ends soon shows us that we're a little bit ahead of the mark where we were last year. So we're hoping for at least as many, if not more, this year.
So what are those 30-something thousand people that show up going to see? I mean, walk me through what you guys are looking at to see this year.
So it's another huge event. We have maxed out the capacity of the Walter E. Washington Convention Center in downtown D.C.
It's a pretty good achievement to have.
We have over 650 equipment exhibitors. We have a massive program for professional development events. Let me read you a couple things about professional development. So we've got the opening ceremony, which I think is a huge professional development opportunity. There are 9 military panels with Army senior leaders talking to us about programs that are coming out. We have 1 Department of Homeland Security panel. We have 9 forums that are focused on family members, 7 non-commissioned officer and soldier forums, 17 forums for Army civilians, a huge contingent for us. 52 different companies coming in to present innovative ideas to the Army. 20 Warrior Corner sessions in the Army Pavilion from Army senior leaders talking about topics. A 3-day job fair, so come get hired. A digital learning session, which is kind of interesting. It's entitled Risky Business, so that ought to draw a crowd. And so much more. I do want to highlight one kind of nice event that we're doing again this year. We're doing a Tuesday night concert.
Excellent.
With Gary Sinise and the Lieutenant Dan Band is coming back, and it is a very nice time.
So looking at AUSA, with this annual meeting happening every year, the Army takes real advantage of you guys putting this on and really takes it as an opportunity to showcase what they want to do. With all the modernization that the Army is doing, it's been the most in many years that we've seen over the past couple. What does that say for the meeting for getting people there for you guys and getting ideas out there?
Yeah, so the Army does use the annual meeting as one of their major venues of getting messages out to many, many audiences. So the theme this year is America's Army, Ready Now, Investing in the Future. We're going to see a lot of equipment displays. So yes, equipment displays and modernizing equipment, huge endeavor for the Army. But we're going to see other modernization efforts in the areas of people, and with a new talent management system that they're rolling out, with new Army combat fitness test, with new holistic health initiatives that they've got underway. So we'll see modernization of people, we'll see modernization of leadership and doctrine, of the organizational structures, all of the different elements of the Army, all investing in that modernization.
You're going to say that with the investing in people now, the Army Combat Fitness Test, that's been something that everybody's been kind of talking about over the past couple months. Do you think we'll see some demonstrations of that? People showing?
We'll see some demonstrations.
All right, that'll be excellent.
I know it's
that'll be excellent, and I know we might see some senior leaders sneaking down there to show off what they can do. And finally, looking at AUSA for you, a lot of stuff going on, but for you, Matt, in the organization, what are you guys most excited about? Is it just seeing the reunion that AUSA is, or what is it?
It's everything. So for us, for our association, it's our ability to complete our mission, to be a voice for the Army and support for soldiers. And we do that through education and formation, educate, inform, connect. We use 3 action verbs to describe that. So that's our opportunity to prove our worth and prove our mission. For us, it's also our internal association business meeting. So we will have our 9 regions and 122 chapters around the world coming together to celebrate all of the things that they've been doing over the past year in support of America's Army. So we'll have a big, what we call our Eagle Awards ceremony for our chapter leaders, and that's huge for us. And it is the Army's family reunion every year. So it's the ability to connect and stay connected with other people that you serve with throughout the Army.
All right, ma'am, I know we're all looking for it. It's going to be a busy few days, but we're all looking forward to it. Thanks for the time here today. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff.
To keep up to date with all of our coverage, be sure to visit our Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn pages. Also, be sure to add us on Apple's News app and other platforms for the latest updates. And when we come back, we're going to look at the need for more range that the U.S. Army faces. It's no secret that the U.S. Army's top acquisition priority is long-range precision fires, allowing them to expand their reach. But it's long been a goal for countries like Russia, China, and North Korea. To learn more about that threat, here's part 1 of our series, Outgunned and Outranged. In modern warfare, artillery in every form is known as the king of battle. But in order to get that firepower on target, you've got to have the range to get there, something that countries like Russia, China, and North Korea have been heavily investing in.
Both our adversaries watched the United States in 1991, they watched us in 2003, and one of the things they concluded, and this is both classified and in the open space, you see comments on this, that they want no part of close combat with the United States, her partners, and our allies. And so if you don't want close combat with the United States or partners and allies because it doesn't end well, then you have to invest in things that keep us at bay, keep us away from where they are or where they're conducting operations. What they have built is overlapping capacity with weapon systems that are sourced in nodes around their area of operations that will be able to extend their lethality across whatever region that we might want to go into. So we have to contend with that from the very beginning.
But there's also another problem that U.S. and allied forces have to deal with. Weapons that move at hypersonic speed.
Well, Russia and China have been developing hypersonic missiles, which is something that we've tried to do but have failed in the past. And while we have not been focused on that because we've been fighting wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, China and Russia are both claiming that they have hypersonic missiles that can fly at Mach 10 or Mach 15. And China has even tested a hypersonic weapon that could supposedly hit Guam in several minutes flying from China. So it's not even that they can go ultra fast, it's that they can maneuver at an altitude that's difficult to detect. If Russia and China have a capability that we're unable to defend against or that we don't have, it leaves us very vulnerable. So if we have hypersonic offensive weapons, it also deters them from using their hypersonic weapon systems against us.
But perhaps the biggest problem is that Russia and China have been building up their stocks of long-range missiles for years, while the United States hasn't. That's something that could have a big impact in a future conflict.
I think it's safe to say that the U.S. is kind of outgunned right now. If they have more and we have less, they can easily overpower us, overrun us.
In part 2 of the series, we're going to look at just how things got to where they are and just how bad that range gap is. And here's a spoiler. It's not good. For almost 20 years, range hasn't been a problem for U.S. and allied forces because they've been in counterinsurgency campaigns. So as a result, research and development hasn't been focused on that problem. But in today's environment, things have changed.
The United States has enjoyed a luxury in the last 30 years or so that if we had a problem in a given theater, we could go to a port of debarkation and without any interference, unload airplanes, unload ships. In the future, that won't be true because of the ranges of their weapon systems.
We can't just go into an environment and use short-range systems anymore. There's a deterrence there. So we actually have to fire from very far away.
So how do you contend with a threat that might target the ports or aerial port of debarkations? You have to be able to penetrate those systems and you have to disintegrate them before you even start.
So just how big is that range gap? Well, right now the longest ranged ground-launched weapon that the U.S. has is the Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, with a range of about 500 kilometers. It's only slightly outranged by the South Korean Hyunmoo-2 missile, which has a range of about 800 kilometers. And while there's a ground-launched version of the Tomahawk with a 2,500 kilometer range in development, it has yet to be fielded. But when you compare that U.S. arsenal to those of Russia and China, you can see just how much of a gap it truly is. Russian systems like the RS-26 intermediate range ballistic missile and the SSC-8 ground-launched cruise missile vastly outrange U.S. systems. And those Russian missiles allow them to hold all of Europe at risk, which would have a huge impact on any potential conflict. And in the Pacific, the gap is even worse. Chinese systems hold the U.S. at risk through multiple island chains, which could end a conflict before it even begins, and decimate U.S. power in the Pacific. In particular, the DF-26 ballistic missile is perhaps the greatest threat, as it can hit Guam and possibly even aircraft carriers at sea. So bottom line, the U.S. military has a huge need for long-range fires, an area that has been neglected to focus on the counterinsurgency mission for years.
we can't be using the systems that we were using in Iraq and Afghanistan. It means we need to be shooting from far away. We have to stay away so that we can't be hit by their systems, but we can hit their systems. That means we have to have better range than they do.
So what's being done to fix this problem? What technologies are being developed? And when might we see them in service? All that is answered in part 3. Take a look. It's no secret that the U.S. Army has a need for long-range precision fires, which is why it's been named as the service's top acquisition priority.
If you're fighting Evander Holyfield, who's got incredible reach, you've got to be able to have good posture and penetration. That's exactly what MDO is. You need to be in position and you have to be able to penetrate their reach.
Standing far back, aiming and taking out systems from very far away.
So what is the U.S. developing to get that reach? Well, when it comes to the Army, they're working on a lot.
Right now the U.S. is focused on extending their cannon range out to 70 kilometers, hopefully, and I know they're slowly incrementally getting there. They're also focused on replacing the Army tactical missile ATACMS system with the precision strike munition. And that missile was intended to only go 499 kilometers. But now that we're out of the INF treaty and no longer have to follow the rules with that, we can actually look at possibly having this missile go much farther than that. They're also focused on a mobile medium range missile, land-based cruise missile that would extend the range there. It's a 1,000-kilometer capability. And this is just the Army's way of getting after a whole toolkit of extended range systems that can go up against an enemy like Russia and China.
But with missile defense systems continually becoming more advanced, how do you ensure that a weapon will hit the target? That's where both extended range cannons and hypersonics come in. For cannons, being able to shell a target or missile defense site is very attractive.
It's harder to intercept something coming from a cannon than it is a missile, which has more detectability.
And when it comes to hypersonic weapons, those could be the silver bullet the U.S. needs.
You know, it's something that the Army specifically hasn't had a good track record in testing in the past. You know, in 2014, there was a failed hypersonics test. That's basically the last test that we've had of a system like this. So we're close to seeing more test firings of a hypersonic missile. We're expecting to see that in 2020. So we'll see where we're going with that technology, but obviously that would be game-changing if we can easily match what Russia and China have been developing over many years. And that's a whole new industry in the United States. We've never had a production line for a hypersonic missile. So if a company were able to win a contract to produce, say, the glide body for a hypersonic missile, that would be quite lucrative.
You always want to enhance and dominate range as we go forward in the future. And so all the technologies that we look at, you want to leverage the greatest amount of capacity in these weapon systems so that you can get beyond their reach. And that would be the ultimate effort when we talk about long-range precision fires and the ability to penetrate their A2AD capabilities.
When we come back, we're going to look at a potential unmanned aircraft for the U.S. Marine Corps. On this week's Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack offers her latest tips.
Let's face it, technology is a major part of our everyday lives. In the military, it's vital to missions, and at home, it's vital for banking, online shopping, and just making our lives easier. It also comes with an element of risk. Experts are calling it the data breach era. Scammers are always looking for ways to get your personal information, so it's important to do your part in keeping it safe. Create strong passwords that are hard to crack. Don't tie your passwords to your personal information and switch them up regularly. Also, use two-factor authentication when you can. Set up mobile notifications or alerts with your financial institution for purchases made from your accounts. This way, you'll be the first to know if fraud happens. And protect yourself on your phone by ignoring unfamiliar calls or deleting strange texts and emails. And especially, never send your personal information in any of those ways. Never click on suspicious links, and let your financial institution know if you've received a call or text asking for personal information. If you think you've experienced fraud or identity theft, call your credit union or bank immediately. They're your partner in securing your financial information.
Thanks, Jeanette. We'll see you next time. To get more defense news coverage, be sure to visit our website at defensenews.com and subscribe to our Early Bird Brief, delivered to your inbox every weekday morning to get you ready to start your day. And when we come back, we're going to look at a potential unmanned aircraft for the United States Marine Corps. The Marine Corps is in the process of figuring out what their unmanned future might be. And Bell has put forward the V-247 Vigilant as a solution. Here's Sean Snow's report on the aircraft and what it can do.
So as the Marine Corps gets ready to fight across the expanse of the Pacific Ocean, it's looking at a large number of various unmanned systems to help fight what it calls the tyranny of distance. Behind me is Bell's V-247 Vigilant. It's a large Group 5 tilt-rotor drone system, and it could be a major contender for the Marine Corps' MUX program. The Marine Corps' MUX program is a large Mega Sea drone that can take off and launch from various amphibious ships out at sea. And the Marine Corps wants a whole lot of bells and whistles in its new tilt-rotor drone. One way that this aircraft could potentially be used is its onboard sensors could potentially relay targeting information or data to forces on the ground, such as a rocket artillery system, a remotely controlled missile battery that could then launch rockets from faraway distances and blast targets, or potentially help sink ships at sea. The Marine Corps says that it wants its MUX drone to be able to cue various weapon systems that could potentially be on board this aircraft. What that means is that anything potentially out at sea, any other weapon system, a ship potentially, or maybe another aircraft, the MUX is supposed to be able to have the capability to cue that weapon system, which means the MUX won't actually have to carry as many weapon systems on board. It also potentially means that the MUX could be one of the deadliest drones in the sky, having an unlimited potential magazine to cue and network other weapon systems out at sea over the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. So another attribute that the Marine Corps wants in its MUX program is an unmanned drone that could potentially allow the Marine Corps to operate independently of an aircraft carrier group, or potentially be able to replace the E-2D Hawkeye that currently runs off aircraft carriers by providing an early airborne warning system. The MUX drone is supposed to be an amphibious launched aircraft from the deck of the ship, and if you look, you can actually gauge the size of what the aircraft would be. Below here is a visual of what would be a UH-1Y Huey. So you can gauge kind of the size of what this aircraft would look like if it was on the deck of an amphib ship. And the tilt rotor blades are supposed to fold up and collapse, allowing the aircraft to fit properly on the deck of the amphib. So the Marine Corps wants to have a fielded MUX capability potentially around fiscal year 2026. However, there's not a whole lot of funding for fiscal year 2019, only about $20 million. A lot of that money is going to various awards and incentives to get companies to find various solutions for its potential MUX capability. So in the interim, while the Marine Corps prepares to field its MUX, the Marine Corps is starting to work with another Group 5 drone known as a Reaper. It's an older hunter predator. It's well known for its drone strikes in Iraq and Afghanistan. The Marine Corps has no institutional knowledge of how to actually run a drone of this size. So as it waits for its MUX program, it's going to start procuring various Reaper drones and getting Marines associated with how to work and run larger Group 5 drone systems.
Every year, Quantico hosts the Modern Day Marine Exposition, giving both Marines and industry a look at future plans and technology. Here's a wrap-up of what Marine Corps Times was able to see there this year.
Quantico at Modern Day Marine. They're showing us the latest tech, drones, and weapons for the Marine Corps. If you weren't able to join, we had an all-access pass. Let's show you around.
So another attribute that the Marine Corps wants in its MUX program is an unmanned drone that could potentially allow the Marine Corps to operate independently of an aircraft carrier group.
It's the replacement for the Amtrak, which has been in service since the early 1970s. For this year's Modern Day Marine, right behind me is the anti-tank variant.
With the Commandant's new guidance on naval integration and getting Marines back to their amphibious roots, there's a lot here at Modern Day Marine pointing us to the sea.
I was really excited about a lot of things that I never knew about personally.
Looking at some of the advancements in UAS as we move forward into the 21st century.
I also like the drone system that we saw out there. It looked very technologically advanced.
All right, let's start over one.
It's a really good time to be talking about this topic. There's an extraordinary level of support for veterans making this transition.
I would say that one of the hard things is figuring out that you can't do it all, and finding the right teammates to be able to execute for you.
When the vehicle goes into water, a water sensor detects the water and the lights light automatically.
This bad boy is an electronic disruptor, and you got it right. Just by the name, you're going to be pointing this at some drones and taking them down.
Behind me is a potential system that the Marine Corps has expressed interest in.
This exoskeleton allows a Lance Corporal to have the strength of 4, or roughly a gunny.
This has been Modern Day Marine 2019. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next year.
That's all we've got time for this week, but if you want to see and read more, be sure to head over to defensenews.com. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.